Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in.
Trends in Science.
Hey, everybody. How much does inflammation bother you? How much have you heard about this in the news when it comes to nutrition? Not just sports nutrition, any nutrition, or even moving forward, like inflammaging is a big thing that you see as far as trends and what researchers are talking about. This inflammation that just tends to build up on you as you age. Well, diet obviously plays a role, like we were saying. This is something that I got from labroots.com. Savannah Logan was the author, January 3rd to be precise, of this year. Excess sugar consumption promotes inflammation. Now, you might say, well, duh, Dr. Lowry, we know that. Well, you may. And if you do, good, this is going to reinforce that with some details, if you will. If not, yeah, this is an issue. So this was based on an article that was published in Cell Metabolism. And that paper revealed new details on how sugar consumption promotes inflammation and disease. This is interesting because, just side story, when I was in graduate school, I remember reading papers, some of which led me to believe that sugar is a carbohydrate, and so that was the fat is bad era. And, you know, it's not fat, so it's clean burning carb. Just go get physically active. And you actually see messages like that from some of the cola companies and that kind of thing. But when you look at the amount of exercise it takes to actually burn through the kind of sugar that you would drink in a cola. I mean, people might put 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar in their tea, but you're talking about putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or more teaspoons in a serving of cola, or, sugary pop, if you will. Even a lot of those coffee beverages on the market. Yikes. So loaded with many dozens of grams of sugar, and inflammation may be one of those things that is a reason why sugar may not be so good for you in excess. This particular piece from LabRoots focuses on autoimmune diseases, and it gives some good examples. Crohn's disease, type 1 diabetes, lupus, there's some of that in my family. Certain thyroid diseases, that's a common type of autoimmune condition. And then, of course, excess sugar then over long periods, at least, driving some of those risks of developing those diseases. It gets sort of mechanistic here. Cells of the immune system require sugar to perform their functions. That's not surprising. It's one of the main fuels. And specialized glucose transporters help immune cells take up the glucose, specifically here, one called GLUT3, GLUT3, that's highly expressed on a specific immune cell, a Th17 lymphocyte. Now, you might have heard me talk about GLUT4 before, which is a common transporter. For example, muscle contractions, when you exercise, it activates the GLUT4, helps the glucose, the carbohydrate, get into the cell. But what about these Th17 cells? This is a pro-inflammatory type of T helper cell in your immune system, and it's often related to the kind of inflammation that comes with autoimmune conditions. The immune system is very complex and often beyond me, even as a physiologist. Maybe we'll get a guest on to talk about all of the different ways that this military, if you will, of your body that protects you functions, and how it can even go awry, like in this case. So again, one specialized transporter called GLUT3 is highly expressed in a type of immune cells called Th17 lymphocytes. They help regulate inflammatory processes, including autoinflammation. The glucose gets taken up in these Th17 cells. It gets metabolized into acetyl-CoA, and if you had some basic biology recently, you realize that that's sort of that molecule derived from food that enters the Krebs cycle. So nothing weird going on there, but in this case, maybe a little bit more than you might think, because the new research that was published in Cell Metabolism shows that it can regulate the activity of certain gene segments regulating inflammation. So the levels of glucose consumption have a direct impact, right, because they supply the acetyl-CoA on these inflammatory genes. And then excess sugar consumption, right, in addition to increasing the risk of autoimmune diseases, can lead to a lot of the other problems that you'll see promulgated by different health agencies. For example, the World Health Organization has a fact sheet that you can find at who.int, why excess sugar is bad for you. And this is really in contrast to what I learned in graduate school, at least reading some of those papers from the very pro-carbohydrate researchers. And in exercise physiology, there were a lot of them. But the fact sheet points out this is why excess sugar is bad for you. It starts with the obvious, right? Simple or free sugars, they compromise diet quality because they're empty calories. Again, like the colas and the sugary drinks that I was talking about. It's usually step one of trying to get a handle on your energy balance, right? All the sugar calories coming in, because oftentimes, where's the protein and the vitamins and minerals and other things in a sugar bomb beverage? Usually not there. So supplies that significant energy without essential nutrients, also increases weight gain, heightens risk of diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, and, damages your teeth with cavities and that sort of thing as well. Now, that link to diabetes, high blood pressure, etc., literally in textbooks 20 years ago, you would read that sugar doesn't cause those things. But again, you might say, okay, it's indirect, but it still has an influence. But here we're talking about more than that, reprogramming toward inflammation, not good. If we go to the actual paper here in Cell Metabolism, this is by Hochrein and colleagues. It's Hochrein, Sophia Hochrein, if I'm saying that right. The highlights of this specifically talk about this special doorway GLUT3 and how GLUT3 dependent acetyl-CoA production controls the epigenetic program of T cells. So reprogramming the blueprint in T cells to be more inflammatory. So this is a more direct at least, mechanism by which sugar drives inflammation. If you're a nerd, I would really encourage you to go to cell.com. It's actually a 2022 paper. Just look for Hochrein, as I spelled it out. Very cool stuff here, because it's really showing, even on a biochemical level, this reprogramming toward inflammation, that sugar, it's not just a long-term indirect, it eventually could make you fat or weaken the nutrient density of your diet, but it actually can reprogram toward inflammation. And again, that's a condition it's in my family in different ways, and I'm taking note. In fact, there were a number of papers in 2022 that were really putting sugar in the crosshairs. Here's another one, Frontiers Immunology from M.A. and colleagues, August 2022. Excessive intake of sugar, an accomplice to inflammation. So what they did was summarize the effects of consuming high levels of dietary sugars, both mono and disaccharides. And they specifically point out processed foods and high fructose corn syrup. But they looked at the effects on high levels of these things on rheumatoid arthritis, right, autoimmune, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune, psoriasis, inflammatory bowel disease, low-grade inflammation in general. And they concluded, based on these reported findings, we emphasize that dietary sugars and mixed processed foods may be a key factor leading to the occurrence and aggravation of inflammation. And I know that's something that active people even deal with, of course, with osteoarthritis and joint inflammation, bursitis. It's not just colitis, right? Pick your itis, I-T-I-S. And sugar is probably going to make that worse. Just to take this back full circle to the original piece from Savannah Logan there at LabRoots, the American Heart Association recommends very limited sugar intake per day, no more than about 6 teaspoons for women and about 9 teaspoons for men. So that's very little compared to what people typically consume. Anyway, some insights for you today about carbohydrates and inflammation. I hope that was interesting, and we'll see you later. Hey, everybody. This is Lonnie Lowry here to tell you that nutritionradio.org is not only backed up on YouTube. You can search Lawnman07 from within YouTube if you can't find it through the nutritionradio.org search, but also on iTunes. Please consider giving us a review. We're brand new on there, and it really helps with them noticing us and getting this, ranked and that sort of thing. And of course, you can find us on Spotify, Audible, /Amazon, all of those sorts of outlets and podcasts, wherever you get them. So thank you. You are appreciated. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.